I remember the day that Prince died like it was yesterday. Even now, years later, it is kind of hard sometimes to get through the day. But it was also announced that he was working on a memoir, and that memoir would one day come out. And the community took it in stride. They had a lot of different ideas as to what it should be, what it shouldn't be, how it should be laid out, what it should look like. And pretty much everybody kind of had an opinion. But I was very much, as I normally am, a sit back and see what happens kind of person. But I have to say, now that we have the book in our hands, this book, I'm pretty darn happy with it. Hey everybody, welcome back to Prince's Friend, exploring music through Prince. Today is not going to be a music review, but it is going to be a book review for The Beautiful Ones, written by Prince and Dan Piepenbring. Now, like I said before, there were some mixed reactions to the announcement that this book would be coming out still after Prince's passing, but you know, I think in the end, it really stayed true to what I think Prince wanted, and I think that this book is going to be a really amazing touchstone for Prince's legacy overall. So like my other book reviews, the first thing I'm going to do is talk about the book itself, what it looks like, how it's structured. Then I'm going to get into the meat of it and kind of give you some of the highlights, some of the things that I saw in the book that I enjoyed or that were particularly interesting to me. I'm going to try and steer clear of as many spoilers as possible, but if you are as adverse to spoilers as I am, then you don't want to watch this yet. Watch it after you're done reading it. And then I'm going to give a kind of overall conclusion at the end, although I think I kind of started with my conclusion this time. And yes, I do know that we are late to the game in terms of getting out a review. But the reason for that is because I never like to rush anything. When this book came out, I didn't get it early. There were other people who got it earlier than I did. I got it on the release day. And I sat down and I read a little bit and then I put it down. And then I read a little bit and then I put it down. And for me, it's like I wanted to have it like the most delicious meal that I could ever have. I didn't want to gobble it down like it was a buffet and then I'd forget it the next day. Instead, I really took my time. I really wanted to look into exactly what Prince was saying, what he could have been meaning, things like that. And I think that I overall enjoyed the book more because I took my time with it. That does mean, though, that it took me a little bit longer to get this review out, but hopefully you will enjoy it. And if you do, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification so you always know when Prince's Friend releases a new video. And we have many more book reviews to come out soon, as well as more music, more discussions. That's what we do here. It's so much fun. So let's jump into the review. The very first thing I want to talk about is the book itself. This amazing picture on the front is what a lot of people have said is Prince coining the selfie. He was the very first person to ever take a picture of himself in the mirror, I'm sure. But the book is called The Beautiful Ones, and to me it always seemed like it was like a secondary title that he came up with after the fact. But the book itself actually does kind of go into the name and why it's called that. Now the book itself, it's a matte finish on the dust cover, and it's like this, you hear that? Like it's a really kind of a granular, I'm not a big fan of this texture for dust covers, but if you take the dust cover off, it is a beautiful purple book, says The Beautiful Ones across the front. That's kind of how I am going to end up displaying this book. As much as I like the picture, as much as I like having Prince, The Beautiful Ones on there, this is really just like classic, amazing book here. I do use my dust covers as bookmarks so that I don't have to dog-ear or anything, but now that I'm done reading the book, I no longer need the dust cover, so I'm good. The book itself is split up into 6 sections. The first part is the introduction by Dan Piepenbring. Then part 1 is Prince's actual manuscript that he wrote for the book, with some additional notes that he sent to Dan separately from the handwritten pages that he sent in. Part 2 is For You, and it is a scrapbook, kind of a photo album that Prince had actually put together with his own notes and everything. I thought it was really, really well done. We'll get into that in a second. Part 3 is called Controversy, and that is some photos along with a bunch of interesting quotes about Prince and his music from mostly in the early 80s, but because this is kind of the rise to Purple Rain, obviously. And then part 4 is called Baby I'm a Star, and it has Prince's original ideas for Purple Rain. The last part is the notes and guides to photos, and it's a bunch of side notes and sidebars and stuff like that. A lot of the notes from the rest of the chapters are all kind of in one place, and also takes a lot of time to cite where every little piece of information is coming from in the book, because we all know that we're going to have those people who read this book and be like, oh, well, Prince said that. It was like, or it says right here, they got it from this interview with Prince, blah, blah, blah. Don't even try coming for them. Dan did his research on that. So that's what you get. The book does have a bunch of amazing photos taken by our friend, Alan Bolio. He is an amazing photographer, and you can tell there's a lot of really good pieces in here from those years, but there's also a lot of really great photos from Prince's childhood, and even just some candids that weren't from Alan Bolio, I think. So let's jump into it. I want to definitely highlight the introduction. The introduction is actually really long. In a book that is just over 250 pages, this introduction is, I think, like 40 to 45 pages. So it is a nice chunk of this book. Again, a sixth pretty much. That's why it says it's the intro, but like really it's its own chapter. And what it is from the perspective of Dan Piepenbring, and he is telling the story of how he got hired by Prince, his interactions with Prince and all of the chaos that is Prince's world, and what ended up happening bringing this book to print. And I think that this chapter is probably the most important chapter of the book. Leading up to the release, there were so many people who had all these crazy conspiracy theories talking about like, oh my gosh, they're gonna change his words and it's gonna be terrible and I don't even know if I wanna buy this. But really, this first chapter addresses everything from the initial idea to what Prince wanted out of this book, to where he hoped to take it in the future, to his eventual death, and how they kind of picked up the pieces and how we got this book instead of the book that naturally Prince would have written a whole lot more of. And I definitely respect Dan Piepenbring for bringing this much authenticity to this section of the book. I think it really contextualizes everything that's in this book. I think it also gives a really good view of what Prince wanted out of this book. And the main thing that I got out of it was Prince had so many ideas as to what he wanted this book to be. But like, he wanted this book to solve racism. Like, it was just so many things. And there were a whole lot of things in this where Dan was like, I couldn't record anything, so I just went home and made copious notes. But the conversations that Prince would have with somebody who was going to share his voice on the book, they were a whole lot about politics and race and movements and like what music means and what the power of music, the power of what a book can be, how we can format it, how we can promote it. Like, it would have been amazing if this had been seen through by Prince. I think it would have been a game changer. It would have been an amazing, amazing thing. And it already is kind of a game changer. Now, I will say that Dan didn't necessarily bring anything brand new. We know as friends that a lot of Prince's conversations end up rambling, end up talking a lot about religion and race and all of those things. I think my favorite part of this book is his depiction of Prince, and not depiction because these are direct quotes, really have a good way of hopefully reaching those people who in their minds think that Prince was completely colorblind and he didn't care about race and all of these things. Like, just read that conversation that he had with Dan, and you can tell that race was actually at the forefront of his mind. Prince realized that he was kind of one of the lucky ones, and even in being one of the lucky ones, he still felt that prejudice against him, and he wanted to fight not only for himself, but for everybody. But the main thing here was that he really wanted this book to be a teacher, a guide, to teach people why music was important, to teach why political causes were important, he wanted it to do so much. And oh my gosh, I wish that it could have done everything that he had wanted it to do. I had a few favorite quotes from Dan's section, and this isn't necessarily spoilers, but I am obviously going to read a couple of excerpts. The first one is 2 days after I returned from Minneapolis, Phaedra Ellis Lampkins wrote to the agents of ICM Prince was about to take piano and a microphone on tour in Australia. As long as it was okay with Random House, he wanted me to join him for the first leg in Melbourne. With characteristic humbleness, he'd promised the Sydney Morning Herald that the shows would be, quote, like watching me give birth to a new galaxy every night. And that's the greatest thing about Prince, is that he wasn't afraid to talk big about himself. And that's kind of how I feel life should be. A whole lot of people come onto this channel and they like call me conceited, and they'll be like, you don't know everything. And I'll be like, I don't know everything, but I know what I know. And I'm definitely gonna speak with confidence. And I can tell you, as you know, from listening to Prince for almost 30 years, yeah, I know a lot. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with being able to say, I am going to bring an amazing thing to you. There's even a section in the book where Prince was talking to Dan and saying, like, literally, I want to write this book with somebody, because if I say I own Purple Rain, it sounds conceited. I need you, Dan, I need you to say that I own Purple Rain, because then it doesn't sound like I'm talking about myself in a big way. Which a lot of people have that idea of Prince, that he was an egomaniac and everything, whereas really he just wasn't afraid to speak the truth. One of my other favorite sections was when Dan was flown all the way to Melbourne because Prince wanted him there so they could go over notes and stuff. But what ended up happening is Prince wrote a bunch of pages, sent Dan into a room to read them by himself, and then called him on the phone. They were in the same hotel, but they didn't meet face to face. And he called him on the phone to talk about the notes. And there's a thing in here where he says, anyway, thanks for coming all the way out here, he said. Oh, no problem, I said automatically. I did not ask him why I'd spent roughly 23 hours in the air just to conduct a meeting with him over the phone. So it's stuff like that. I mean, but Prince was so eccentric when it came to that sort of thing. Like, and my thought on it is, I think that Prince, since this was his very first time doing a book, I think he probably felt self-conscious. He, you know, that's the thing is, when he knows what he's doing, like he'll pick up an instrument and he'll blow your face off and he'll get up in your face. But writing was new. So he's like, just tell me what you think, but I don't even know if I can look at you while you're telling me. And that honestly, to me, that humanizes Prince a lot right there. But anyway, I'm not going to talk too much about the first chapter. I actually really enjoyed learning about the process of bringing this book to print and everything. I am, like I said, I'm a publisher myself, and I'm a writer, so it makes sense to me. Like, I guess I'm probably a lot more interested in that section than maybe some of you. So I'm gonna move on from there. Thank you, Dan, for everything that you put into that book. I think it was amazing. I'm gonna go ahead now and get into part one, The Beautiful Ones. And this is Prince's 30 handwritten manuscript pages. And looking back at the thing that I was talking about in terms of me not liking spoilers, I am not the kind of person to pick up a book and start flipping through it. I am the type of person who I'm going to read it from cover to cover. So what ended up happening with this book is they definitely do have, it's really cool. It starts off with a picture of his mom, but they have his handwritten manuscript notes here. And there's 30 pages of them, his actual, this is what he wanted in the book. But of course, after reading those pages, you get to it actually all typed out. And I was reading it, and I remember reading the book and I'm like, oh my God, I know that a lot of people were really mad and they were like, if it's not Prince's handwritten pages, then I'm just not gonna read it. But it was kind of difficult to get into the groove of reading what Prince wrote. Dan, in his first chapter, said, like, you get used to it along the way, and that's exactly what happened. But those first few pages were rough. Kind of learning how, like, okay, so the plus means and, he writes 2, he writes 4. If it's B4, he'd write B and then 4. And, you know, if it was performance, it would be per and then the number 4 and then mance, you know, so stuff like that. And it really took a little bit to kind of get into the groove of actually reading what Prince wrote. It does help later on in the book to have learned that skill, but it was definitely one of those things that I was like, oh my God, I wish that they would have just printed it out. Oh, they did. So the first half of this part is his actual handwritten notes. And then the second half is not only everything typed out, but additional notes, because Dan, in his section, he said, like, I sent notes to Prince and he sent me follow-up stuff. So that's where this information, the extra information, comes from. So what I'll say is, it was actually really, really well written. It was definitely a memoir. It was definitely in memoir territory. He was telling stories about his childhood, about his parents, and how they kind of molded him and shaped him. And he even stopped writing before he actually got to anything that was really about him being in music. It was really about his earlier life, his earlier childhood, his mom, his dad, his stepdad, Andre Simone's mom, his aunt, like just so many different people in his life. He talked about his first kiss. He talked about his first time, having sex. He talked about all of these like very intimate things that I thought was really, really cool. And I actually saw some people who were like, oh, this ain't stuff that we ain't already heard about. And I'm like, really? Like, you already knew the story about how the girl came up to him and it was the girl he had a crush on for so long, and they were doing some sort of weird kissing game, and how that he finally got to kiss her, but that actually wasn't his first kiss. Like, you already knew about that? There's no way you already knew about that unless you were one of those people. So it just seemed really weird. Like, people who just think that they know everything. These are in his words. This is him saying what he wants to say. It's just crazy. A lot of it is accompanied with notes between his mom and his dad, which I thought was really, really nice. His report card is in here. There's pictures of him when he was a kid, and it says, with Skipper written places. He talks a little bit about his sister. He calls Taika his estranged sister in the book. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And he does talk a lot about genetic memory and how you carry pieces of your parents in your DNA as memories, and you probably have pieces that come from your entire family tree, and how he is always kind of trying to fight against his mother's side and his father's side, and that's what When Doves Cry was about. And it was just such an amazing read. Some of the stuff, yeah, we did know, but like some of the stuff was just, and it wasn't even just that you're reading it and it means so much, but in his own words, and you can feel through it what it meant to him. And I think that was the important thing. But he talks about like girls that he went out with, and there's even pictures of those girls, and just like all kinds of just fun stuff in this book. And he starts kind of talking about how he was leading up to getting Grand Central started, and then it kind of ends. And oh man, like, and that's the thing, like, I don't even want to ruin anything in this section for you, but I think that there are so many personal stories, and he didn't just tell the story. He says, and this is how I felt at the time, and this is how confusing it was for me. And I was elated in this one, but I was also like happy in this one, but I was sad when this happened. And it's one thing to know the facts, but it's another thing to know the person in it and what he got out of those experiences. It was a pretty amazing read. And I know that there are a bunch of other people who are like, review is a hard thing to do with this book because it very much is about like what Prince means to you, and there's so much emotion in this book. So when I'm saying that this is a review, like, yes, it is technically a review. It's a review of the book, but I'm not going to give it a star rating. It's 5 stars. Like, you need to buy this book. And I'm not even done with the review, but you need to buy the book just because you need to buy the book. And because there's so much in here that is just, again, I think it's going to be an important touchstone in the Prince community for a long time to come. Part 2 is called For You, and when Prince was working on his very first album, he kept pictures of everything, and he like chronicled it through a photo album, which I thought was really, really amazing that Prince kind of had the forethought to do that. One thing that I thought was interesting is that any mention of Owen Husney, any pictures of him are gone. So I don't know why. Maybe he just doesn't want to be associated with the book, but his pictures, anytime that he's noted in the book, it's gone. And I'm gonna have hopefully some of the pictures and stuff floating up around where I'm talking over here. But this is essentially the same as his manuscript pages. It's each page of the photo album, and each page has 3 pictures and notes on each picture, his first house. One of my very favorites is him with a very serious look, and it says before, and then him with like Groucho Marx glasses, and it says after the surgery. And so he was definitely having fun. But there's pictures of him with people who are working on the album with him. Andre Simone is in a couple of the pictures. It's just beautiful. Like, there's pictures of like where he lived when he was making it. And those pictures, there's like the famous, selfie pictures from the cover. There's pictures of him, like pictures of his crotch, pictures of his butt, like pictures of hands coming out of his pants. Like, it's just kind of crazy. He was having so much fun with all of that. That he was just like, if I'm gonna have this album, I'm gonna do it myself. Like, I really want this to be a thing, and I'm gonna have fun with it, because who knows if it's ever gonna happen again. You never know. And then this is where we get to the section of the book where there's a whole lot of lyric sheets, where you get to see how Prince used to write his lyrics. And there's some parts where it's the lyrics there and he'll scratch out a whole section. There's ones where he'll write a whole bunch of different lyrics, but you can tell that he skipped a few because they didn't end up working in the long run. There are just so many different amazing things that you can get just from seeing his creative process when he's writing down the lyrics and like how he wrote it down. It was just really, really cool to see all of this amazing stuff. So then we get to part 3, which is controversy. And controversy is actually kind of about everything that came after For You, but it continues the same kind of feel of the For You chapter. So there's a lot of photographs of his photo shoots from his Prince album, his Dirty Mind album, Controversy, and 1999, which is obviously where a lot of the Alan Bolio photos are now coming into play in the book. But there's also amazing other things like promotional material, so you can see like what the posters that would be put up in record stores and stuff like that would be like, so that was pretty cool. And a lot of it is framed with quotes from various points in Prince's career where he was talking about his early development. One of the big ones that I loved was when he was talking about why he sings in his higher register. And he was like, I found that when I would sing low, I couldn't get the power that I wanted, so I would sing higher and I could get that power, but trying to get that power in my low register would actually hurt. And I had heard that interview before, but it was cool to see it quoted here because like I've said that before to other Prince friends, and they're just like, I don't think that's why he sings. I think he just, but I'm like, no, but I heard his interview. And then I couldn't find that interview anywhere again, of course. But along with a bunch of Alan Bolio's pictures, there's also a lot of candids, some Polaroids that he obviously took himself. There's some lyrics to the song Vagina in here, which is gonna be on the 1999 Deluxe that's coming out. I think one of my favorite pictures, and I'm gonna have it up here, is one where he is drinking a drink and he's kind of got his teeth out like that, and it's just like I feel like that's not a picture Prince would have let go out there because he looks a little dorky, but like that's I have lots of pictures of me like that. It's like. Because he was already in the process of like molding his image and everything. There's just so much here that it's so great to kind of have it all in one place. And it really is just an amazing read through, just reading his quotes, looking at his pictures, seeing who Prince the man was, especially early in his career. It was really, really good. The last part is called Baby I'm a Star. This is part 4, and it is his original thoughts on what he wanted Purple Rain to be. And again, they give it in his handwritten notes, and I learned this time, they give it in his handwritten notes and then they have it typed out afterwards. I think the reason for including his original thoughts on what he wanted the movie to be in this book was really just to highlight, because a lot of people have said that it's semi-autobiographical, the movie. And Purple Rain is very much that. But before you read his handwritten notes on what he wanted the movie to be, it's hard to idealize like what part is real, what part isn't real. And I think I'm probably gonna go into more of what Purple Rain was versus what it ended up being, likely in a separate video. But I do just wanna say that you find out that like all three stories of him, Morse Day, and in the original treatment, Vanity, but ended up being Apollonia, all three of those characters were Prince. He was writing about different aspects of himself. And that's actually one of the really cool things that I dug about reading his original treatment for Purple Rain. After that, there's his handwritten lyric sheets for the songs that are on Purple Rain's soundtrack. And it's really cool. I think probably Computer Blue being my favorite one. Computer Blue and Darling Nikki, I loved seeing those ones written out. That's a huge example of like on Darling Nikki, the whole first verse is scratched out. He ended up not using it. And on Computer Blue, there's a bunch of extra lyrics that I'm like, what? And then there's even some lyric sheets for like Raspberry Beret and Kiss and like all of these other things kind of leading through his whole career. There's a storyboard for the video of Kiss, and the video seems very like almost impromptu, but it was heavily choreographed, which I was very interested in finding out. And then that's the book, and then it goes into, like I said, a bunch of the notations and sources and stuff for all of the information in the book. So here's my final conclusion. This book is a must-have. You have to go out and get it. If you listen to any amount of Prince's music, whether it is just the 80s stuff, or if you're like me and you listen to everything but mostly his later stuff, you can listen to anything of Prince's, and if he has touched you in any way, you want to read this book. You're gonna get a real sense of who he was, not only from the conversations that were presented from Dan Piepenbring, but also from Prince's own handwritten manuscript, and just reading the quotes from the different interviews. Not everybody has seen every interview, so it's cool to, like, I'm sure there's gonna be one or two that maybe you haven't seen. And then obviously seeing how he wanted to represent his persona in a movie, Purple Rain. The thing about the promotion for this book, however, was that it was sold, and if you read the original thing, it was like, this is a chronicling of Prince's rise to Purple Rain and all that stuff, and I was just like, oh God, that sounds so exhausting. But Dan in the book actually even addresses that and says it's not like Purple Rain was the end, it's that this was chapter 1 of a larger story. And yeah, I totally agree with that. That's exactly what I've always thought of Prince's 80s and his early career leading up to Purple Rain. All of that as a precursor to what eventually was to come and where he was to go. And I like this book a lot, and the way it's presented and the way that the information and the words were given so much care. I really, really love this book, but had I gone just from the promotion of the book and like the back of the book writing, I would have been like, oh, this is gonna be an exhausting book. There's just gonna be another book saying that Purple Rain was the greatest thing ever, where that's not what's actually in here. So my first impressions of the way that the book was being marketed turned out being wrong. So I think they should probably change the marketing, because that's actually still the marketing. But really the book it's a joy to read. It's an amazing thing. You know, like I said, 5 stars, you have to own it, go out and buy it. But if you've been reluctant to pick it up, hit the link in the description. You will not be sorry from having read this book. It is, like I said, nearly 300 pages, and almost every page is just, mwah, this is perfect. So, with all of that said, hopefully you did enjoy this review. I do want to know about what you think of this book down in the comments, and there are a few other things about this book that I want to talk about in separate videos, but this is the overall general review, and it's a long one, so I apologize for that, but hopefully you did enjoy it. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/princessfriend. I have to say that sometimes the patrons are one of the only things that gets me up in the morning. I love going on there and talking with you, sharing amazing things with my patrons. They get some exclusive stuff. Sometimes I'll post stuff on there and they'll be able to give me some feedback. And then that actually helps the final product going to the videos here. So there's a lot of fun stuff going on over there. If you want to be a patron, patreon.com/princessfriend. You can also check out our purple calendar over at princessfriend.com. And I think that's it. Okay, so thank you so much for coming to Princess Friend. May you live to see the dawn. I love you all.